So they have to measure the interventions and programs of the public sector to make sure that there's actually an impact on public service delivery. When it comes to the CVPs, the constitutional values and principles, is the fact that they have the PSC needs to make sure that public servants have a high level of professional ethics and adhere to the highest professional values of the Constitution. There needs to be effective management of resources. There needs to be fairness, equity, non-partisan, non-bias compliance to the Constitution, and those types of constitutional values. Also includes making sure that there's representativity of the public service, in particular when it comes to redressing the imbalances of the past. And they also need to make sure that there's effective human resource management and career development practices in the public service. So I've just mentioned to you the functions of the Public Service Commission, as well as some of the constitutional values and principles of the Public Service Commission as enshrined in Chapter 10 of the Constitution, in particular looking at sections 195 and 196 of the Constitution.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and also Ms. Makubele.
Mkolomba. Miss Mkolomba.
No, wait, andithi ke ngoku ke kuzofuneka ndibheke elinye page because I was reading tomorrow's.
Oh, yes.
Then also I wanted to prove to you that mina andikhumbuli because today is a new day.
Okay, no, that's fine. We can all have amnesia once in a while.
No, not really. No, not really, because in your introduction, ma'am, you said we might be familiar with you.
Yeah.
There's a different, separate leg of interview. It's got nothing to do with the past.
Okay, no
So
problem.
I was moving from that under so that.
That's fine. I understood that. I apologize.
Yes, thank you very much. Having said that, and also taking the cue when you're introducing yourself and also responding to the chair's question, and my apology, I'm Mainale Soma, member of the subcommittee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. The public service functions, as you alluded to, but just to be crispy and direct now, I'm just saying, making that statement and the question. The public service functions aimed at, among other, to promote the values and principles governing the public administration, as it were, and to give directions aimed at ensuring that personnel procedures comply with the principles thereof. In your own words, ma'am, is the Public Service Commission making an impact in the public service? And how can the public service reposition itself to make an impact given its wider mandate of promoting values and principles governing public service administration?
Okay.
The second one, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, I should have warned you that I'll have two legs. My apology. The second one, which will be my last one for me, Chair and Ms. Mkolova, is that constitutionally, do you think a spouse and children of the political representatives, if you say politically, you might use the word public representatives, and former members should be prevented from doing business with the state? Provide merit for your answer and provide a solution thereof. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honourable MP. So I think when it comes to Public Service Commission, I think so the Public Service Commission has made attempts. If I go through the website of the Public Service Commission, there've been a lot of webinars around resource management in an environment of procurement complexity. They now have a guide of the constitutional values and principles, which guides basically the values and principles that govern public service administration. There have been a lot of webinars and dialogues, even with as the SA and the EU dialogue on values-driven public sector reforms. So there's been a lot of dialogue. So I think the Public Service Commission has done a good job at instigating dialogue around the responsibilities of public servants in as far as aligning themselves and giving effect to constitutional values and principles. But the truth is that the public sector is basically has a culture of patronage, a culture of corruption, a culture of nepotism that still is plaguing basically the public sector as a whole. There's poor coordination between national, provincial, and the local government levels in terms of the different spheres of government. And so because like it's like a fungus, it's like a cancer. Nepotism, patronage, political interference, and corruption are the fungus that currently are undermining the efforts the Public Service Commission has attempted in order for them to transform the public service environment as a whole. So I think that what needs to happen now is a culture of intolerance to corruption, nepotism, patronage, and there needs to be a culture of consequence management within the public sector as a whole. And I think I think with the Public Service Commission, because it's got a limitation on its mandate is largely advisory and oversight. It doesn't have an implementation mandate. We need to make sure that we canvass Parliament to extend the mandate of the Public Service Commission so that it includes issues of even advising on issues of prosecution, so that the culture of consequence management in the public sector is felt most wholeheartedly. We need to introduce watchdogs over corruption in the public service. We need to introduce policies for whistleblowing in the public service. We need to introduce champions of anti-corruption in the public service, contracts and pledges, so that people can commit to not only just signing their performance agreements, but can commit themselves to making sure that they adhere to the requirements, the constitutional requirements of their public service duties as a whole. So I think there's so much more the Public Service Commission could do to try to deal with issues of especially instability between the political and the administrative, and making sure that the separation between the political principles and administrators of the public service. But that can only happen if you extend the mandate of the Public Service Commission to include issues of implementation and imposing interventions to transform the values of public servants as a whole. But most importantly is the issue of consequence management. When it comes to the issue of political representatives, and basically should they be doing business with the state, I believe that the cooling off period is necessary for any person who has worked in the state or is a politician or a political representative of the state when it comes to doing business with the state. And that's because of the power relationships that currently exist between politicians and administrators, especially with those who are in the supply chain management environment. There's a power relationship that's unequal and uneven, and because of the experience in the public service as politicians, this could give rise to increased corruption, increased nepotism, and increased patronage. So I do agree that if you are working for government or if you're a politician in the country, you shouldn't be doing business with the state because of the negative consequences that will come with your involvement over the supply chain management component. So I definitely agree to a cooling off period.
Thank you, Miss Mkolomba, Zukiswa Mkolomba. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, my first question is a two-in-one, but I'm also going to ask you my second question.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I am Miriam Kibi, a member of the panel. I thank you. The Constitution directs the public service to be professional, accountable, and develop-orientated, and the NDP further amplifies this constitutional directive by identifying specific steps that need to promote the value and principles across public administration. Now, my question is, what is your understanding on the vision of professionalizing the public administration in the country? In your response, could you please distinguish between cadre deployment based on the meritocrat and mediocratic into the public administration? My second question on is part 2 of my first question. What could be the role of the Public Service Commission in ensuring professionalization of the public administration is institutionalized? Now, I'm moving over to my second question. Maladministration and corruption are cancers so ingrained in the public service, has become the new normal, and it's impacting negatively on the development in this country. Now, my question is, what causes corruption, and how can the PSC play a meaningful role in preventing, reducing, and curbing corrupt practices in the public service? Can you also please indicate current weakness in the system and propose your solution in your response? I thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, Honorable MP. When it comes to my understanding of what it means to professionalize the state, so basically for me, what it means is that you recruit people who are competent, who have high levels of skills, with high levels of experience, and with the prerequisite qualifications that will ensure that they can deliver on the delivery of the mandates of their roles within the public service. It also includes issues of code of conducts and the attitude that the civil servant or the public servant will have, and also has to do with intention when it comes to basically being committed to the social good. So the professionalization of the state has to do with meritocratic recruitment, making sure that you've got the best people, the most talented public servants with the right attitude, committed to the social good and service delivery objectives and mandates of government. And that's what it means to professionalize the state. It also means that you have an equal opportunity environment whereby, regardless of your sex, gender, race, sexuality, and other characteristics, if you are the right candidate for a job based on competencies and based on qualifications and experience, then you should be the person who is chosen, as opposed to those who have political alliances and political loyalties. So that's what it means to professionalize the state. In as far as cadre deployment is involved, the merit-based cadre deployment has to do with not only choosing people who are politically aligned to you when it comes to political participation in the party, but also making sure that the people that are deployed by ministers or politicians into strategic roles in government, they also have the capacities, the competences, the prerequisite qualifications, and the prerequisite experience to make sure that they're able to deliver on the duties and the roles that they've been deployed to. So the difference for me is the meritocratic is merit-based, is based on merit as well as political loyalties, and the mediocrity one has to do with reckless cadre deployment, whereby political parties deploy you into strategic roles regardless of their capacities and competencies. In terms of what is the role of the public service in institutionalizing the professionalization of the public service. So I think basically having a code of conduct that is implemented, and you make sure that there's consequence management when there's been contraventions of the code of conduct of the public service, in particular the Batopele principles and the Batopele framework. So there must be a consequence management and dealing effectively with corruption, nepotism, patronage, and reckless cadre deployment. So you need to ensure that the code of conduct is used to disincentivize bad behavior and to incentivize good behavior, good attitudes within the state, especially when it comes to issues of recruitment. Also, I think the public service can play an important role by being involved in the recruitment of SMS members, but obviously with making sure that they recruit together with the administrative head of the public service that will be located either in the presidency or located in the Department of Public Service and Administration. So they could be more involved through the recruitment process. They could be involved by developing an effective code of conduct for the public service, by making sure that there are campaigns in the public service and workshop that speaks to issues of constitutional alignment to the values of the Constitution. And by making sure that also when dealing with professionalization, making sure that there's effective training programs that will bring awareness to the public servants themselves on their role as public servants and how they are to make sure that they are competent professionals with the right attitude, committed to the social good in the state. So that's how I feel that the Public Service Commission could play a bigger role, but you'd have to extend the mandate to involve implementation and for them to provide measures for interventions, pragmatic interventions that will make sure that the public service is transformed and is professionalized. Then you asked, what is the cause of corruption? So the cause of corruption, to be honest, is a values-driven issue. It's to do with greed by humanity and having a disregard for the resources of the state and having a disregard for the people to whom the state is mandated to serve. So when you're someone who is selfish, greedy, not people-centric, and you're all about your own upward mobility, regardless of how you get there, you want to acquire wealth, despite the cost of the process you take to acquire wealth, that is the cause of corruption. So it's a values-driven cause that causes people to be corrupt. And also, it's also systematic, right? If you don't have the right interventions in place, the right institutions and the right systems in place that will prevent corruption, curb corruption and prevent corruption in the state, then you, because of systematic and institutional weaknesses and instability of leadership and instability of the systems themselves, that's why corruption will breed in the state, and that's how you won't be able to address issues of corruption, because of systemic weaknesses and institutional weaknesses when it comes to state capacity and state leadership of the state. And ma'am, what was the last question again? Okay. The last question. Oh, okay. Awesome. Yes. Thank you.
Ngibonge Chairperson and welcome Nkosazana uZukiswa, Honorable Sibisi Mzwake, a member of this subcommittee. Like my colleagues, I will have two questions. Professionalization of the public service can happen as a function of the meritocracy, which is a system of appointing or promoting staff based on the knowledge and skills. Now, the question would be, as a commissioner of the Public Service Commission, how would you advise government departments to institutionalize meritocratic ethos in the administration of the state in order to achieve professional public service? That was question number one.
Okay.
Now I'm taking question number two. How do you think the Public Service Commission can, one, strengthen its own oversight, and oversight two, and oversight by Parliament? Thank you.
So how can you institutionalize meritocratic ethos within the public service? So I've already spoken about the interventions that can be introduced to deal with corruption, patronage, and nepotism in the public service. So I'm not going to repeat myself when it comes to that. But I think also the how to institutionalize meritocratic ethos is by having your Batopela principles adhered to, by making sure that you address misbehavior on the part of public service through a culture of consequent management. It's by having code of conduct, it's by having pledges, it's by having champions who will champion the professional ethos and the meritocratic ethos in the public service. It's about recruitment, making sure that you recruit the right skills, the right talent, who's got the knowledge and the experience of public service delivery, and will be able to fulfill the requirements of the jobs to which they've been appointed to. And the Public Service Commission can be involved in the recruitment, in particular of senior members of management, together with the administrative head of public service, to make sure that there's a hybrid approach to the recruitment process, an approach that says you have to account to the political principle when it comes to issues of policy, but when it comes to issues of administration and operation, then you account to the administrative head of the public service, which would be located in the presidency or located in the Department of Public Service and Administration. So I think also by having awareness campaigns, workshops, and ensuring that you use the performance management tools of the public service to manage the rotten eggs out and to manage people who are highly talented with the right attitudes, who observe professional ethics and the highest standards of professional life within the public service. So I think that there's a need for us to make sure that we're able to use our performance management tools effectively, and not just as tick boxes, but as tools that are used as levers to basically make sure that you develop the right candidates for senior management roles, and the rotten apples are managed out of the system. But all of this has to do with making sure that there's leadership in public service. And if you have a DG that's committed to public service innovations and transformations, and a DG that's committed to public service transformations in particular, that's how you'd be able to make sure that you institutionalize how to professionalize the public service. But meritocratic ethos has to do with recruitment primarily, making sure that you have institutions in place, systems in place, task teams in place that are able to recruit the best talent who are experienced, knowledgeable, qualified to do the job, and you deal with issues of reckless deployment in government.
Did you hear the second question?
The second question is, how do you strengthen the oversight capabilities of the Public Service Commission? So I think for me, the most important thing for me, I think we need to make sure that all decision-making that takes place within the public service and the policy-making processes within the public service are evidence-based. So if you have a compelling research agenda that is based on evidence, looking at the best practice of what other countries are currently doing to make sure that they improve oversight, that is one way that you can improve the oversight capabilities of the Public Service Commission, by making sure that your reporting is evidence-based and it is supported by research, a compelling research agenda that draws from other experiences of other government institutions from across the world, and not just looking at South Africa, but looking at government departments like in the UK, China, Brazil, that are currently doing very well when it comes to the oversight capabilities. So I think having a compelling research agenda will improve the oversight capabilities of the Public Service Commission, in particular to itself when it comes to internal accountability as well as to Parliament. I think when it comes to Parliament, so I think it's an issue of making sure that the Public Service Commission exercises its constitutional duties without fear or favor. So being honest when it comes to reporting on the status of public service in the country, and also being very open about the negative consequences of political interference and reckless cadre deployment in the processes. So it's a mutual process by which Parliament holds the PSC accountable, as well as the PSC holds Parliament accountable when it comes to issues of political interference and reckless cadre deployment by the leading party formations in Parliament. But I think having a compelling research agenda, extending the mandate of the Public Service Commission to include implementation, as well as making sure that they exercise their roles and responsibility as independent commissioners without fear or favor. That is how we can strengthen the Public Service Commission. But having a culture that is accepting of difference, a culture that is accepting of contradictions, a culture that is accepting of differences, and making sure that honest appraisals and honest assessments of performance are done without fear or favor. That is what will improve the oversight responsibilities and capacities of the Public Service Commission. Thank you.
The other member I was going to ask is not with us here, is on the virtual platform.
Okay.
That is Honorable Clark. Honorable Clark, is your turn now.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning. My name is Michelle Clark, and I'm a member of the subcommittee. My first question is, it is believed that a responsive, ethical, and values-driven public service depends on, among other things, the investigative function of the PSC. On public administration, malpractices, particularly in the areas of irregular appointments and curbing of corruption in government departments. How can the PSC strengthen its role of investigation of unethical conducts and play a meaningful role in assisting government to curb corruption in the public administration? That's my first question. My second question is, the power to appoint in South Africa is assigned by Section 3, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act. Ministers or MECs can delegate the power to officials within the departments. 1. What are the major obstacles in the recruitment system in the public sector? Is the public sector recruitment system effective in order to ensure professional and a capable state? And 2, what can be the role of the PSC in eliminating unethical practices in the recruitment system in order to ensure public servants are appointed based on merit? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. So the question is, in terms of the investigative function of the Public Service Commission, what can you do to make sure that appointments in the public service that basically there's proper investigations taking place when it comes to issues of corruption, nepotism, patronage in the public service? What is the role of the Public Service Commission? What can it do to improve its investigative capacities? And I think for me, an important part of the investigative function of the Public Service Commission is to ensure that the Public Service Commission actually appoints people who are investigators, people who understand the investigative terrain, other as people who've been involved in prosecutions in the legislative and the legal fraternity. So they need to make sure that there's the right capacities appointed and recruited by the Public Service Commission to make sure that they're able to fulfill their mandates of being an investigative arm for public service within the state. So the issue of correct and right recruitment plays an important component, in particular building the capacities of the state through training workshops and other programs. That's how they can improve their investigative functions. I also think it's important to have a whistleblower protection policy, so a policy that will protect public servants who actually expose corruption within the state and the unprofessional work ethics and unprofessional conduct within the state. So if you make sure that there's a whistleblowing policy that protects whistleblowers in conjunction with making sure that you popularize and you familiarize public service of the anti-corruption hotline that currently exists in public service, that's how you'd be able to build the capacities of the Public Service Commission when it comes to the investigative mandate and the investigative function of the commission. And I think also there's something that needs to be done in terms of the mandate of the Public Service Commission to make sure that it not only advises on issues of prosecution, but is also empowered and enabled to prosecute bad behavior and prosecute those who are guilty of fraudulent activities and negative and unethical behaviors within the state. So I also think that mandate plays an important role, especially when it comes to implementation and implementing interventions that will curb corruption, nepotism, and patronage in the public service. So I've mentioned 3 examples of how you could build the capacities of the Public Service Commission to make sure that they're able to fulfill the investigative functions of the commission. And then you asked what are some of the obstacles of the recruitment process, and what can the Public Service Commission do to make sure that you address the negative maladministrative practices when it comes to recruitment, and what is the role of the Public Service Commission in addressing unethical practices in the public service. So I think the major obstacle currently that faces public service is the issue of political interference, whereby the politicians they unduly influence the administration and the operations of the state without just and require public servants they're the ones who are involved in determining who gets appointed as the administrative head or as the DG or as a senior manager in the public service. So the issue of political interference is definitely an obstacle when it comes to issues of recruitment in the state. I also think that cadre deployment policies, in particular reckless cadre deployment, is a problem in the state because cadre deployment that is reckless and not meritocratic based doesn't take into account the needs of the role that is being appointed for and that is being fulfilled. So if you basically recklessly deploy cadres without the prerequisite competencies, experience, qualifications required in order for them to deliver on the job, that is a problem. And you will undermine the efforts that you are trying to introduce to build the state capacity and to deliver service delivery for the citizens of South Africa. And what can the PSC do to make sure that it curbs unethical practices in the state? I've already spoken about the issue of dealing with corruption, nepotism, and patronage. And basically, you need to introduce specific interventions and specific measures and to build the prerequisite institutions that not only advise on issues of prosecution, but also make sure that the people who are found to have contravened on the basic principles of the public service are actually arrested, and there's a consequence management culture within the public service. So I also think that if you were to appoint an administrative head of public service, whereby DGs and other senior managers would be able to report on the administrative components to the administrative head of the public service, and only on policy matters when it comes to principles, that hybrid governance approach would also assist in ensuring that the right people are recruited and that nepotism and patronage do not determine who gets to work as a senior manager or as an administrator or technocrat in the public service. So I do believe that the National Development Plan has Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan has specific recommendations for how you can make sure that only the right people with the right attitudes who are committed to the social good are recruited into public service. And I think the Public Service Commission could basically sing a hymn out of the National Development Plan when it comes to Chapter 13 of the plan. You can sing a hymn from the constitutional requirements that are enshrined in Chapter 10 of the Constitution, Section 195 and Section 196, as well as the Public Service Act gives guidance on how to make sure that maladministration and unethical behavior is curbed. So the Public Service Commission is empowered, but you could do much more to extend the mandate of the Public Service Commission as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Rosina Komani, the member of this subcommittee. Having listened to your responses, one is tempted to ask and to state that there's a huge loss of public monies due to corruption, especially with public servants doing business with the state. So my question would be, in your own opinion, how could public servants be stopped from doing business with the state, since there is legislation already preventing such practice, yet it is still ongoing? Thank you very much.
So I think the questions are quite similar, and the biggest issue is the issue of corruption, nepotism, and patronage. And I've already spoken about having a cooling off period to make sure that no one is appointed by the state to do business with the state if they've worked for the state, either as a politician or as a senior manager of government. So making sure that you have policies that reinforce the need for a cooling off period to make sure that there's no abuse of power by people who have the ability to influence the procurement process or the supply chain process because of their involvement in the state. So you need actual specific policy instruments that enforce the cooling off period as part of the contracts of public servants and as part of the contracts of politicians to make sure that they don't do business with the state once they've worked for the state. So there needs to be a cooling off period. And really, guys, this is really, honorable members of parliament, it is about developing a culture of consequence management. If there are people who have been found to have done wrong, who have adhered to unethical professional ethics in the workplace, whether it's corruption, greed, and who basically have broken the law, it's not good enough to give the golden handshake, but you actually have a culture of consequence management, whereby you deliver the people who are involved in wrongdoing to the state for prosecution by the legal fraternity. I've already spoken about introducing the whistleblower policy that protects whistleblowers who expose people who are doing wrong in the state. I've already spoken about the watchdog that not only advises on prosecution, but has the capacity and is empowered to implement prosecutions after investigations have found that people have been involved in wrongdoing. I've already spoken about the champions. Public servants who are champions of anti-corruption in the state need to be appointed. There needs to be pledges and contracts and values enshrined in the contracts of public servants to make sure that there are champions of an anti-corrupt and have zero tolerance culture within public service. Also, I've spoken about the campaigns in public service and the workshops, the training workshops that basically make sure that public servants are familiar with their constitutional mandates when it comes to professional and ethical behavior. But the most important thing is making sure that those who get caught get punished and are not given the golden handshakes by politicians because it's simply convenient. So let's develop a culture of tolerance, anti-tolerance, that has a zero tolerance to corruption, and make sure that there are consequences to every action, in particular for the bad, rotten apples within the public service.
Ms. Mkomalomba, is there anything you want to ask from the past?
So she said, the
panel?
honourable member of parliament intimidated me earlier in her remarks when she said that this is a different process. So the question that I had in mind would contravene her objection. So I can't ask it. I actually had a question about the previous process, but I think it would be an inappropriate question to pose at this stage.
Yes, it will be.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm not going to ask it.
Okay.
But all I want to say also to members of parliament is that I know that, like, I'm a young person. I know that I'm very young, and it's an honor even to be here amongst the top 19, as young as I am in the public service. But I also want to convince you that I'm committed, I'm able, I'm ready. I might be young, but I will have the capacity to bring dignity to the office of the commissioner if I were to be appointed. Because I believe that I've got the experience, the attitude, the energy, and the innovations and the ideas to actually reinvigorate public service leadership in the country. So don't look at my age and to be intimidated. I will have the capacity to bring dignity to the office of the commission if I were to be appointed.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Mkolombo. Thank you very much. Indeed, you are very young and energetic. We will not hold that against you. Thank you very much for participating in this interview. You are now released.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
I don't know that age.
No, you must know.
No,
Bragging about this young thing.
I don't like going to the ages because otherwise it will be a conflict of
No,
interest.
I will see it. I'll check their ID.
You may take the seat. Let me kickstart this process. I am Chocho James, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration, and also chairing this interview panel. Could you please briefly confirm what is contained in your CV? Just briefly, because we have copies of your CV in front of us.
This one?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm an admitted attorney for 20 years. I hold a BProc LLB. I have an accounting, public entities for accounting, as well as corporate governance qualifications with UNISA. I have served and chaired in a number of boards and audit committees. My background and history is forensic investigation, compliance, regulations, audit and risk. I've served also and chaired a number of HR committees. Yes, and I have been involved in a number of audit committees and risk committees and HR committees as well. So at least about 20 different positions held over the 20 years in terms of various boards. I'm not sure, I'm trying to be very precise in terms of this. So yes, and I also am a High Court litigator. So I appear in the High Court for the past 20 years. So I hold the role of advocate and an attorney in terms of the new LPC rules. Thank you, Chair.
The Public Service Commission has a constitutional mandate to promote the values and principles of Section 195 of the Constitution. And my question is, can you briefly, what is your understanding of the functions of the Public Service Commission and the values and principles governing public administration?
So, yes, Chair, we obviously, our mandate is derived from Section 195 and then the 196 of the Constitution. My understanding of what we have to do is obviously in terms of the public administration, we've got to look as the Public Service Commission, is everything compliant, but most importantly, are we adhering to what the National Development Plan wants? And in particular, are we looking at creating an environment where the public servants do what they are tasked to do, but at the same time, have we given them the required skills? Do they have the required skills in order to do what they are tasked to do? It is very important that we also look at it from the perspective of transparency, upholding always the issue of ethics, the consistent approach and compliance with regards to skills development, and in particular, are we holding the public servants accountable in terms of what they should do? And is the public in particular, who's our biggest stakeholder, in my personal view, happy and pleased? Are they involved in the policy making? Do we have reasonable and in particular HR policies that are compliant, looking at current skill shortages? We obviously have to deal with complaints that are referred to the Commission. We've got to obviously look at the monitoring of the entities that report to it. And then further, in terms of that monitoring, are we in particular evaluating what is before us, and are we then developing and recommending certain recommendations for implementation? Yes, of course, we also have to deal with, monitor, evaluate promotions, discharges, dismissals, you know, and all of those HR-related functionality. So we're technically sort of like the HR department, you know, for the public service divisions and its entities. Thank you, sir. Chair.
Members of this panel will introduce themselves before they ask questions.
Sure, thank you, Chair.
I thought I must make you aware of that.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. My name Ms. Maharaj. I'm Maina Lesoma, member of the subcommittee. Thank you very much for availing yourself. Having listened to your introduction of your good self and also responding to the chair's question, I would love to know directly now from your good self as well, with your understanding of the Public Service Commission functions, which are aimed at, among other, to promote the values and principles governing the public service administration and to give directions aimed at ensuring that personnel procedures comply with the principles. Then my question will be, in your own view, ma'am, is the Public Service Commission making an impact in the public service? And how can the Public Service Commission reposition itself to make an impact, given its wider mandate of promoting the values and principles of governing the public administration? My last question, constitutionally, as you would know, do you think spouse and children of the political representatives or public representatives and former members should be prevented from doing business with the state? Provide merit for your answer and provide possible solution thereof. Thank you very much, Chair and Ms. Maharaj.
Thank you, Ms. Soma. Those are really three very loaded questions. Yes, yes. So I'll start with the fact that I've served on a number of boards, and I think you know that from my CV. And for me, are you making an impact? The answer is simply no at this stage. And I say that, yes, we've had an unqualified audit, we've achieved all our key performance areas and everything from what was available that I've seen. But as a person who have chaired audit committees and have been chairs or deputy chairs of boards, you know, the one thing I've always said, and I jokingly, you know, in the team that are sitting waiting to be interviewed, we're having a brief discussion. And funnily, it actually impacts on this very question. Well, whenever we have to report to Treasury and when we have to report to the AG in our reports, why is it that we don't also jointly report to the Public Service Commission? Because in all of these SOEs that I am personally involved in, we don't see that impact, you know. In particular, when we deal with the HR reporting and our skills development shortages, or we're dealing with the recruitment and selection processes and so on. And in particular, the recent skills development shortages that you've seen amongst SOEs. I mean, the scorecard amongst the basic scorecard, ma'am, is that 60 to 80% of our workforce are not suitable for the positions they're in. And that's what I found in the entities that I personally am involved in. So then the question is, we should be having a synergy between the Public Service Commission and all our entities. Maybe it could be a monetary shortage, maybe it's a capacity shortage, a budget constraint, but I think we should maybe issue a practice directive from Parliament to say all SOEs, all the reporting and the researchers that you work with, we should also be reporting. So whatever we report on to those two entities, we report to you as well. So yes, whilst it looks good and it has unqualified audits and everything, I do think we have to reposition ourselves, for sure. So moving on to your second question. And how do we do that? We need to set examples. We need to have a strong marketing drive. And now that Industrial Fourth Revolution, I'm not sure if you've seen, on the 23rd October, Office of Presidency issued the report, which is a 202-page document on the fourth quarter in terms of, you know, the how should IT impact our lives and what we should be doing. And I think that's what you need to do, is to get that infrastructure going with all your entities. So whenever we report one place, we copy paste to you as well, and then we do the high profile reporting. Marketing is very simple, you know. These days, technology is so easy that on a touch of buttons, you either make or break an individual. And if you are able to then use that technology seriously to impact and create what we would call the quality monitoring system. I omitted to mention I also have a training background. So if I go to the QMS, right, the quality management system, and I allocate and I say, on all my entities, this is our repeat findings. This is what's wrong from the HR perspective, from the complaints perspective. I mean, I'm not even going to go fraud and corruption perspective, but if you can just pick up all those repeat findings, duplicate what's in all those joint management letters, and then look at it and say, okay, these are the things that we have to do. I mean, the Public Audit Act, I think you know, has been amended. So if you've got repeat findings, you're holding your executive authorities, right, accountable. And so if you're going to hold those executive authorities, the EAs, accountable, then clearly you're going to be setting the bar very high to say, as the Public Service Commission, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to implement, and this is where consequences are going to come in. But at the same time, we have to understand, to address the imbalances of the past, yes, I know it's a long time that has gone by, but there are still those imbalances, Chair, with respect. We still have the serious gender inequities out there. We still have, even in tenders and a whole lot of even business-related issues, there is the skills shortage, and we obviously have to put in programs to address those. This one, the last one, in relation to spouse and children and public reps. I'm going to just say this. As a lawyer myself, I have two views on it. I'll give you the first one, which is my gut feeling view. If I married antenuptial contract, excluding the accrual, and my brother, my father, my ex-spouse even, or whatever the position is, chooses to do business with the state and have tendered, meet functionality, have complied with all the SCM prescripts, and successfully, without any funny business, if I can use that word through you, Chair, colloquial term, got a tender or a whatever they have. Why should they be prevented? Are we not limiting the freedom of movement? Are we not impacting on the choice in terms of business and so on? However, and that's just my gut feel input. Personally, for me, if I want to uphold the ethics of my business, and if I had to be appointed to this post, or for any public servant for that matter, we call the CATS. I'm sure you've heard of CATS with the Auditor General of South Africa, who clearly would pick up all the third-party related transactions and would say to you, okay, so these are the people that we pick up a flag that's doing business with the state. Personally, I wouldn't do, and I wouldn't permit my husband or partner, to do business with the state if I had one. But if my daughter, who is not part of me, who lives in a different province and so on, who wants to do whatever she wants to do, and I have no control over because she's an adult, I can't see now why I should prevent that. And there I'm saying, simply put, it depends on facts, it depends on circumstances, but if you've applied for something fairly and squarely, I can't see why one should then be prevented. Ma'am, I hope that has answered my 3 questions. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Mayor Maharaj, I'm Miriam Kibi, a member of the panel. I'm going to be asking you 2 questions. My first question has got 2 questions in it, and then I'll be asking the second one. Now, my first one is, the Constitution directs the public service to be professional, accountable, and development-orientated, and the NDP further amplifies this constitutional directive by identifying specific steps that need to promote the values and principles across public administration. Now, here is my question. What is your understanding on the vision of professionalizing the public administration in the country? In your response, could you please distinguish between cadre deployment based on the meritocratic and mediocratic into the public administration? Secondly, what could be the role of the Public Service Commission in ensuring professionalization of the public administration is institutionalized? And then now, I'm going to my second question. Maladministration and corruption are cancers so ingrained in the public service has become the new normal, and it's impacting negatively on the development in this country. Now my question is, what causes corruption and how can how can the PSC play a meaningful role in preventing, reducing and curbing corrupt practices in the public service? Please, in your response, indicate current weaknesses in the system and propose your solution in your response. Thank you, ma'am.
I think this interview is getting more and more difficult, Chair. Yes, thank you, Ingibi. So starting with cadre deployment and appointment. You know, I'm going to be brutally honest and say, in preparation for today, I read the 2019 interview for this post and the whole debate and discussion, and clearly the fact that the person wasn't appointed would tell you clearly that you know, we shouldn't. But I think critically, what we do out there, you know, there's two things we do. We do it for the purpose of human rights, and we do it for personal development, and to ensure that we're proud as a South African of what we've produced. That when you are out there and you speak proudly and you say, I work for a public entity, right, or an entity of government, and this is what I've done and I've changed, it mustn't be because someone put me there and that's how I got it. You must get it purely and squarely on merit. So my personal opinion is that we shouldn't be doing and putting anybody in places because of those deployment issues. If I come for this interview, it shouldn't be because Nalini is a human rights lawyer, and so on and so on, and I'm associated with so many people, or I may have a surname of Maharaj that's linked to someone else. If I had to be appointed here, it should be purely because you are happy with me as an individual. You believe that if I were appointed to this position, it would be purely on the basis of what I can do from my own mindset, my own strategy, my own implementation, my own experience in the sector, and so on. So I hope I've answered that part of it. In relation to public service and making sure that we fulfill what we have to fulfill, it is critical, ma'am. Because that's the only way in which to turn around what is currently happening in government sectors. It's no secret out there that a lot of people and the reputation of the public service servants are at risk. And we've got to make sure that we implement and enforce our legislation that we have to show the power and the tools that we're not just an entity that sits there, but we actually are going to make that change. So enforcement, consequence, management, and ensuring that we do what we say we're going to do, and that we monitor quarterly at least what we say we're going to do, and hold people accountable so that the public can so they can actually believe that, look, there is the change I need to invest. That when I pay my tax, I'm proud to pay it because this is the benefit I get. That everybody is treated consistently, everybody is treated on the same footing, and we are not looked upon for because of race, gender, and creed, but we are upholding the constitutional principles and the ethos and the democracy that we all fought for. In relation to maladministration, I think it's such a difficult question, ma'am. I can only give you my opinion, and certainly not based on fact at this stage. But what causes corruption, I'd say, is greed, in my personal view. You know, I've always said, as an audit committee chair and chairing a number of boards, that we created the central supplier database system for a reason. It is to give everybody the fair opportunity, on condition you are tax compliant, that we should bring in the thing what I call the rotation of service providers, because then everybody competes fairly and squarely and nobody is left out. The richer don't get richer and the poorer get poorer. And for me, greed is what causes corruption. If we had to share the budget amongst entities and the people of South Africa who are in business, firstly, we would reduce unemployment, we would reduce crime, but most importantly, you would get rid of this, what I would call a parasite in society. There can be no, I mean, I sit and I listen to, sometimes I don't even listen, but when I do listen to the 5-minute news that say, breaking news, this is what's happening on your phone, some new business thing comes, and every single day it's about somebody who's caught out for the wrongdoings that they've done. And you look at their environmental conditioning. They're not a poor person in a rural area who's a widow or a widower with children. They are successful people that hold degrees, most people. They're educated, they have good jobs. You can't understand why it is they would do this. And those are the ones is where we need to start, set an example. If we have justifiable, tangible evidence, we act. So what is it that I would do to reduce the curbing of corruption? I definitely would implement the Public Audit Act, the amended version, recent one, to say if there are repeat findings, call the people to account. If there is, in the form of a proper forensic investigation with evidence that is tangible, that can be used in court, let's test it and try it. But we need to start setting examples. Yes, we see the 1 or 2 happening, but that's what we would do to curb it. And we need to make it public for people to see that you're not just an institution that has no teeth. This is what you're able to do and how you can bring in the change. Of course, we need to promote the issue of whistleblowing, ma'am. I have personally wrote at least 3 or 4 whistleblowing documents in my past 2 years now for various institutions, Univen. You asked me to give you examples, so Univen, the MTF, the Bank CETA, so on. I've even prepared the reports for Zondo Commission on the 20 top 10 companies and how I believe personally that the CETAs have failed us. You know, the CETA environment is created for us to deal with our HR challenges and the amount of levies we pay them. But if you look at what they fund, who they fund, why is it that we still have so many people in the public service that are not fit for their positions? So, yes, we can incentivize whistleblowing complaints. But we need to tighten the loophole, and the loophole is in who do we report to and who does the investigation, Chair, through you. And for me personally, you cannot use people that you've used in an entity previously to do the investigation, and certainly not the so-called CAEs or internal auditors, because they are all part of the syndicate with respect to what I have found. So we need to externalize it. We need to work very closely, well, with our sister organizations, be it the Hawks and so on. And you need to make sure that people know that, yes, if you whistleblow and there is fact to it and on investigation it's found to be truthful, then we incentivize. But for me, the incentive is not so important, but the protection. Because we've seen many examples where people, I think it was City Power, JRA and so on, where the whistleblower 2 days later was found dead, right? So we've had many examples where people just disappear, missing people and so on. But you'll find that a year ago, they were a whistleblower. And if you look at that trend happening, You know, people are now saying, no, I don't have the faith and confidence anymore to whistleblow, because ultimately the wrongdoers finds out what is happening and then changes what they know they have done wrong, or protects or destroys information. So if we use the fourth industrial revolution technology to save our information, that no matter what you do, no matter who you destroy, what you destroy, the information is still safe from an external perspective, then you are able to get somewhere and to redo and rechannel and reprioritize who you report this to and who does the investigations, and bring to book the wrongdoers. So, ma'am, I hope I've covered your questions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Ngibonge sihlalo. Mama Nalini, this is Honorable Sebisi, a member of the portfolio. I'm going to ask you 2 questions.
Thank you, sir.
My first question is having a statement that says, professionalization of the public service can happen as a function of meritocracy, which is system of appointing or promoting staff based on the knowledge and skills. The question is, as a commissioner of the Public Service Commission, how would you advise government departments to institutionalize meritocratic ethos in the administration of the state in order to achieve professional public service? That was question number 1. My question number 2 is very short. How do you think the PSC can, 1, strengthen its own oversight, and 2, strengthen oversight by Parliament? I thank you, Ms. Maharaj.
Thank you, sir, for the questions. So this one I've sort of touched on in one of the questions to Ms. Soma, but I'll repeat it for purposes of making sure I've answered fully. So, sir, professionalism in appointing of staff and skills, it's so, so important, because this is what is going to give us the teeth that we want. If we appoint the right people in the right positions, and we make sure that people come to work not for purpose of earning a salary and going home, but knowing that you make a difference in the public person's life, because it's a mindset issue for me, very, very important. I've looked at the comments on the public domain out there, through you, Chair, on what your staff in the PSC think of the PSC. And some of the comments were quite sad, because it said, you know, there's no promotion and so on and so on. But when I look at what we are intended to do, and I look at how much of training programs we have in the 28 seaters out there, and I look at the investment that we have to put, for me, the staff are like family in an entity. You spend the most amount of your time at work, and you have to invest in your staff. And if you don't do that, and we don't invest in our public servants and show them and reiterate that with continuous monitoring, there's 2 things that can happen. We improve where your skill shortages are, what we call in the CETA environment, your skills areas, and we look at your annual plans, and we look at, as an individual, where do you lack? And we improve those by implementing the training. And we invest in our staff with those programs, and we monitor the impact that it has. Not just somebody, I want to do this and I put them there and we don't see the impact. And then we incentivize, which you have, in terms of the key performance areas in their contracts. We amend it in consultation with each other. And we invest in the form, look, it's truthful. Everybody looks at how much do I earn? What do I get in my performance bonus? And then I have this incentive now to do greater and better things. If we follow that process, sir, right, with the CETAs, and we look at my key development focus areas, and I look at how I've improved, then that's the way to go. Okay? What is also then important in this process will be the few that's going to fall by the wayside, who are not going to improve, who we've got to unfortunately put through hearings on a performance counseling basis and deal with those. But align with that, when you invest in your staff and they're able to see the change and this turnaround, now your entire workforce has a positive vibe. And with positive energy, everything happens. And what you would see changing, right, is the ethics of reporting wrongdoing. Because if they say, I come and I put this effort, and you come and you do this and you're doing the wrongdoing, I need to take out this problem and take you to the dentist and pull out that tooth if I have to, that's troubling me, right? But at the same time, I mustn't infect the others. So you create this mentality that what you're doing is right, right? If you want protection, encourage the whistleblowing, but at the same time, you're now creating an environment where impact is felt, appreciation is felt, and motivation is there. And more importantly, you know the 4 priorities of how do I function in my day, priority 1 to 4. That's critical for me. Because sometimes time management is where public servants fall off. And we don't know which is priority 1 to 4 and which one impacts on my plan for the year and my performance areas versus this nitty-gritty people that are irritating me with just some silly gossip and wrongdoing that may have no merit even. So those things, you know, is important. How does the PSA ensure the oversight? By ensuring that just like how we have a monitoring plan against our budget and our key performance areas annually, we've got to do the same for our staff. Take those policies, put them into plans, implement those plans and monitor it. So our HR personnel and those heads in those positions, we need to redevelop all those policies. And we to ensure that those that have improved and those that haven't, what do we have to do? And we monitor those. And if you're seen to have this oversight and you monitor it and you nip it in the bud when you can, instead of when it's too late, now therein lies our support for what we want to do. Hold in big entities your HODs, your CEOs, the executive authorities accountable and say, this is what I have found, what are you doing? Because every time you'll hear about the vacancy rate is being so high where you don't have money to fill it, but there are key roles that are missing. And then when you look at performance, you're asking us, but why are you underperforming? And it's simple. You either got the wrong person for the job or we don't have money to pay. But we've got to look at what we currently have in place and how are we then going to utilize our current funding, current people, and change this outcome. So, sir, I hope I have answered you. Thank you, sir.
The next question will come from Honorable Clark. She is not with us here. She is on the virtual platform.
Oh, hi, ma'am. Sorry,
Thank you,
I didn't know I'm being
Chairperson.
watched.
Thank you very much. My name is Michelle Clark, and I'm a member of the subcommittee. The first question to you is, it is believed that a responsive, ethical, and values-driven public service depends on, among other things, the investigative function of the PSC on public administration malpractices, particularly in the areas of irregular appointments and curbing of corruption in government departments. My first question is, how can the PSC strengthen its role of investigation of unethical conducts and play a meaningful role in assisting government to curb corruption in public administration? The following question. The power to appoint in South Africa is assigned by Section 3, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act, Ministers or MECs can delegate the powers to officials within departments. Question 1. What are the major obstacles in the recruitment system in the public sector? Is the public sector recruitment system effective in order to ensure professional and a capable state? And question 2 on that, what can be the role of the PSC in eliminating unethical practices in the recruitment system in order to ensure public servants are appointed based on merit? Thank you.
Chair, through you, I'm starting to think that in my opening address I've answered already a lot of the questions, but I'm going to go back again.
Some of the questions are related.
Yes, so thank you, Ma'am Clark, for your question. Through you, Chair. With regards to ethics, it's very important. I have in my HR capacity, sorry, Chair, do you mind if I pull the mask down a little bit? It's hindering me from speaking properly.
Yeah, we have taken down ours.
Okay, if that's in order then.
Anything against you for putting it down.
Yes. So thank you, Sir Chair. Yes, absolutely. So what is happening with regards to irregular appointments and the role of investigation by the PSA? So I'm very aware that those kind of irregularities are reported to you. And what then are the issues? So for me, there are many irregular appointments, Chair. Let's not debate that. It's a fact out there. And what has caused those? Firstly, when the adverts go out and the manner in which we write out what we want, so this is applicable for tenders and for positions because we have been monitoring this as in the entities I serve in. And what is critical here is that when I put out what it is that I'm looking for, I already have an idea as the HR personnel who are tasked to put out these adverts of what kind of person I'm looking for. Not what I have to do in terms of the job, not what am I going to revise here in terms of latest trends and the research that have come out in terms of HR personnel and posts. So the one is obviously favoritism, nepotism. I think it's common. But what is it that is the obstacles? Firstly, we have the same people in those positions for a long time. From an audit perspective, from a risk perspective, I can tell you now, we should always be rotating at some point who are those people in positions, maybe move if we can. So I know you can't have 2 HR managers, for example, in one SOE, but have that function where you have what we call a twinning, right? Where you train one. So in the event that you are on leave, and now in COVID you should be doing it because you have 50% there, 50% not there. So make sure we can train each other to do what we can so that you have what we call the segregation of duty and the power that is now divided. So it's not in the hands of one. And that would be, for me, one of the solutions to avoid who we get, the caliber of people we get, how those shortlisting is done, and of course, from an IT perspective, making sure that the favorite people don't know everything that they will possibly be asked, in order to get the scoring right. That's where the other problem is. Just like in tenders, you have the BAC, then you have the specifications, the adjudication, and then the evaluation. Likewise, in your IT, you have your internal audits that look into the process of appointment and how that happened. But why do we then still have the same problem? With respect, I can tell you this. Most of the internal audits in our SOEs are working for the institution on a full-time basis as a salaried employee. The mindset of those people are no longer there to say, I am separate from you and my oversight function is the following and I'm transparent. And at a long duration of time, you lose because you engage with those people all the time and you don't have that external view to look into, zoom into things. You become too comfortable, and hence those are some of the things that are creating this unethical problems and obstacles in the public service. So for me, if I had to come in, what is the thing that I would do first? The first thing I would do is try to make sure that we put all of these people on 5-year contracts and that we externalize and bring in totally independent people, reviewable only over a 2-term basis, so that we don't have the same people in the same positions. We also need to say the one that puts out the advert, the one that does the shortlisting, where then is the external function? Everywhere that you go now, people are putting it or outsourcing it to the employment agencies out there, right? Now when you get a person back, you'll see, it'll say in their reports, headhunted so many. And then you'll see others that applied so many. And then you will see internal candidates so many. What's the problem with that? Why are you headhunting in a normal process? We need to align all our processes so that they're the same, that they're neutral, transparent, all the things that we as the PSC believe in. We need to make sure it's implemented across all the sectors. And if we can do that, Ma'am Clark, I think that would actually prevent this unethical conduct, that we don't use the same recruitment agencies because they've done well. We rotate them. We rotate our HR personnel. We make sure that the people who put out the specifications are not the same people that do the shortlisting, and so on and so on. And those are our concrete, tangible suggestions and solutions to the problem. Thank you, Chair. I hope I've answered the question, Ma'am Clark.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Rosina Komani. I'm the member of this panel. I hope you're not intimidated by one question being asked several times, because the intention is to get to the finer details, and so that it becomes easier for us to can identify. Having listened to your responses in many questions that would equally relate to the question that I would be asking, I would like you to take cognizance of the Public Service Regulations of 2016 and the Public Administration Management Act number 11 of 2014. Given that, one would say there's a huge loss of public monies due to corruption, especially with public servants doing business with the state. Also, have you noted the responses, particularly to the first question that was asked by Ms. Lusoma? But then my question would then be, in your own opinion, how could public servants be stopped from doing business with the state, since there is legislation already preventing this practice, yet it is still ongoing? I want to put on record that when you give this opinion, you would also speak to the fact that you indicated earlier that we should balance these things. And if I heard you correct, in terms of your articulation earlier, there is little to do. There is little wrong to do with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, Ms. Komani, for your question through you, Chair. You know, I did say that my personal preference is that we should be implementing the legislation and that we shouldn't be doing business with the state. I said that fairly and squarely upfront to you, and I still maintain that personally. I think the problem here is with our executive authorities, HODs, and CEOs, Chair. And I say that because as an audit committee member and as a chair of some various audits, we get what we call the cards, which picks up people doing business with the state. I've said it to many of my CEOs and reporting line function that you got a report, what have you done with it? We have been silent. And this is what I said, one of the things that we need to implement, whether I am successful or not, you know, I'm saying to you, when we report to Treasury, when we report to Auditor General, we must report to you as well on what is happening on the repeat findings in our institutions. And the CAT scan is what you should be receiving straight from Auditor General. When they put it in the management letters or in the documents to the entity. They should be sending you a copy. And I've seen the MOU between you, the Auditor General, and all the webinars that you're doing. And I'm so glad that I've now heard that there's a female heading up the AG, and I'm so proud of that. And hoping you, as the Public Service Commission, sets up that meeting so that you get nationally and quarterly those reports. Because the same people who get paid to work in those posts are doing business to what extent? It's one thing to declare I'm doing business, it's another to tell me how much of money you're earning there. And you know for a fact, if I am doing business with the state, firstly, it's a criminal offense, ma'am. We should be arresting those people. They are in non-compliance. 2, you also need to look at to what extent, if you gave permission for them to work in those or do business with the state, are they benefiting? To what extent do they spend time in their office doing what they should be doing versus their own private business, and who's benefiting? Because if you're able to look at these reports that we get, ma'am, why is it that all your entities turn a blind eye to it? It's not, it's everywhere. So people must be serious. We've got so much of unemployment. If you want to do business, make your decision. But you can't be doing both. It's wrong. So what is it? The answer to your question, ma'am, is that we need to implement the legislation, work with SIU, make arrests, set your example, and most importantly, prosecute. Because making arrests is one thing and very nice sensational news. But what was the outcome? Did we get a prosecution? Because that's where we fail. So the Department of Justice, Correctional Affairs needs to come to the party. And so with regards to family, again, I'm going to reiterate. The relationship to the family is very important. And am I benefiting financially is very important. And if the answer to the question is no and no, they shouldn't be prejudiced. But if there's a yes, then they should be investigated, put on suspension, and dealt with. And so, Chair, and Ma'am, Ms. Komani, I hope I've answered your question as succinctly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Maharaj. Is there anything you want to ask this committee?
Absolutely none, except to say thank you for giving me the opportunity. I have loved every bit of it. That whether I'm successful or not, I hope you've listened to some of my responses and implemented anyway.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maharaj. You understand that we have a long list of people to interview. You will hear from us whether you are successful or not. Thank you very much once again. You may leave. You may be excused.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And good luck for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can I run to that room that is so private again? Because I'm drinking water.
We must just prosecute. But we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, no,
Although it's too early.
yeah, no, I thought we would experience some delays, but
No, we do, but not so much. Because we are So we're 1 hour behind. Yeah, so it's not so much because she has been very straight and very conservative with the elaborations. Kuza umngani wakho? Ngubani manje umngani wenu? Naye ulokhu engakomani shortlisted him, eh? He was the most popular man. I so was strong. He was mostly in terms of when we were shortlisting preferences.
We are moving very well. Eh?
Yeah, we're just strictly 1 hour behind.
Yes.
Which we might make it.
I'm happy.
No, we
I'm
are.
happy though.
No, even the approach that we have taken does assist.
Yes.
But also, even when members they ask, they also link with previous question. It does help the person not to raise that all over again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fikeni. I am Jojo James, the chair of this interview panel, also the chairperson of the Public Service and Administration Portfolio Committee. Could you briefly confirm what is contained in your CV? Not in much details because we have the copy of your CV.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members. Let me first express my deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to come and reflect here. In my CV, in terms of education, I do have BA honors, Peace and Development Studies, Master's, PhD in different universities as listed. I've chaired quite a number of boards. I've initiated community development projects. And one of the key things I'm doing now, having initiated that, is the establishment of the Indlulamity South Africa Scenarios 2030, which has become the platform for strategic conversation about the future, for analysis of future trends. I'm a public speaker, I'm an academic, I've been in the heritage sector, and more recently, in the last few weeks, I've presented on repositioning higher education in South Africa. I've spoken to the business school on repositioning the business schools to build a capable state, and the other one has been the one on depoliticizing the public sector. So in a nutshell, I have those things, but key to it, if I were to summarize it, I am a person with passion for knowledge, but I'm also a policy practitioner who has been involved in the public sector. Hence, you find that my actual experience and my academic qualifications do always converge. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fikeni. The Public Service Commission has a constitutional mandate to promote the values and principles of Section 195 of the Constitution. Now, my question is, briefly, what is your understanding of the functions of the Public Service Commission and the values and principles governing public administration?
Thank you, Chairperson. These are articulated in Chapter 10 of the Constitution and further enunciated in the Public Service Commission of 1997. The first one, in a nutshell, is the oversight over public service. It's the advisory role. It's also the analysis of the sector in order to advise. It's to account to Parliament and advise, empower Parliament on the trends of what is happening in that sector. In terms of the principles, the one of accountability, responsiveness, the one of, fairness, independence. Those are some of the principles. The ethical conduct of the public service becomes key, especially when you look at the current situation that we find ourselves as a country. So in essence, the Public Service Commission, if one were to summarize, is to ensure that good practice in fulfillment of the constitutional mandate of public service is in place. And that fulfillment mainly is to have a capable public service in the service of the people of South Africa.
Thank you. Members will also ask you questions, yes, and they will introduce themselves before they ask their questions.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and welcome, Doc. And thank you for availing yourself for this process. Taking from the manner in which you presented yourself and also responding directly to the question asked by the Chair, one would say that although you have indirectly responded to, I'll start by a preamble, then the question. The Public Service Commission functions aimed at, among others, to promote the values and principles governing public service administration, and also to give directions aimed at ensuring that personal procedures comply with the principles. In your own view, Doc, is the Public Service Commission making any impact in the public service, as it were? And how can the Public Service Commission reposition itself to make an impact, given its wider mandate of promoting the values and principles governing the public service, as it were? Secondly, which is a second question, which is not necessarily linked to my preamble, is that constitutionally, do you think spouse and children of the political representatives and former members should be prevented from doing business with the state? Provide merit to your answer and provide a possible solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, I would make judgment on the Public Service Commission except to say I think there is a room for improvement. And that room for improvement would actually depend on the PSC, not just relying on its own resources, but having strategic partnerships for higher impact. But also not just relying on the traditional programs that it has had, but analyzing the trends and looking at best practices elsewhere. Because within its own budgets, especially in this time when you do have fiscal crisis, you have to do more with less. I wish it had higher profile. I wish it had an appeal where every other entity, provincially and nationally, in terms of public service, it was a go-to place. But right now, from where I stand, I don't see that. Now, having been involved in training some of the Public Service Commission personnel, having been involved in giving lectures to the School of Governance, having been involved in giving lectures in the business schools where some of the public servants go to, I do see a scope of what they could do. But most important, now that I've spent a bit of time in the last few years on the scenario planning, on the trend analysis, it is not only what ought to have been done, but what are the emerging trends, whether within the context of the fourth industrial revolution, the technologies, smart governance, e-governance, that could be utilized in order to amplify the role of the Public Service Commission. What are the partnerships with the media that could make sure that Public Service Commission is a point of reference? Its presence in the social media, because that's what now is the key area that drives the agenda in many ways, even for the media. What are the partnerships with the business schools and universities? More so because I work with most of the universities across South Africa, the vice chancellors or the deans of these business schools. One would immediately want to translate that into an effective tool for the PSC. I've been talking to a friend of mine, we studied together, Dr. Mary Mwande in Kenya, who is in their Public Service Commission, and a few other people in Asia. And I visited Vietnam, their school, which is training public servants. All those are some of the things to say, what can we do to improve the profile of the PSC, the effectiveness of the PSC, without using too much of resources, because we always have this popular refrain, if I get more budget, I'll do more. Here you can do more with less. On the second question, I do think that where spouses and children of politicians, especially in government, want to do business with government, you ought to have the stringent possible conditions to ensure that there is nothing in terms of the misuse of influence because of their parents' proximity to power, and everything is above board. If you are the son or the daughter or the cousin of a politician, it cannot be that you have never bought a wheelbarrow. You suddenly, because your father or mother has become a minister, you have become this genius in civil engineering and construction projects and so forth. There is something wrong there. It is known throughout the studies, throughout the world, that children and people around political leaders use that influence. And you can almost see the take-off when all of a sudden a person who was a nobody is everywhere, winning every tender and so forth. And that is where the Public Service Commission ought to come in, because this is the cancer the country is suffering from. And I've raised that issue in the public spaces. I've raised that issue in different forums. So I've been quite consistent with that particular issue. The second one, the lifestyle audit. And also the appropriateness of anyone winning a tender. This issue of people winning a tender when you have never been in that sector has costed the country, the state, the taxpayers a lot of money. So to me, I would look at best practices, but have the most stringent conditions. And once a person has done something wrong, use technology, biometric mechanisms to track that person not to get other opportunities, because people reinvent themselves and they reappear somewhere.
Thank you, Chairperson. I am Miriam Kibi, a member of this panel. Bawo Ufikeni. I have two questions, but my first one, the Constitution directs the public service to be professional, accountable and development orientated, and the NDP further amplifies these constitutional directives by identifying specific steps that need to promote the values and principles across public administration. Now my question is, what is your understanding on the vision of professionalizing the public administration in the country? In your response, Tata, could you please distinguish between cadre deployment based on the meritocratic and meritocratic into the public administration? What could be the role of the Public Service Commission in ensuring professionalization of the public administration is institutionalized? And my second one is, maladministration and corruption are cancers ingrained in the public service, has become the new normal, and it's impacting negatively on the development in this country. Now the question therefore is, what causes corruption and how can the Public Service Commission play a meaningful role in preventing, reducing and curbing corrupt practices in the public service? Once more, in your response, please indicate current weaknesses in the system and propose your own solutions. I thank you, Tata.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Those are very important issues. I want to start by saying this. The Constitution talks of the development of a capable state. The National Development Plan talks of this capable state. The President, in his State of the Nation address, has talked of this capable state. All political parties, when they put their manifestos, they talk of this capable state. There is a reason for that. You can never be a developmental state if you do not have a capable state. And all countries that have shown development have leadership and capable state. Even our own reports in the Indlulamity Scenarios 2030 have foregrounded the issue of institutional capacity of state as one of the key if we are to put ourselves out of this situation. So professionalization is key in that sense. We've seen countries like Israel, Italy, and others with coalition governments that collapse every other 18 months. But those states never collapse because they have capable, professionalized bureaucracy, which is non-partisan. So the first problem that we have here is the politicization of our bureaucracy. Even worse, that even within a ruling party, if it is factionalized, the bureaucracy itself becomes factionalized, the deployments become factionalized. You begin to see the high turnover of leaders, high turnover of public servants, and therefore high turnover of policies before they even have any impact. And that is what the country has suffered from. RDP to GEAR, GEAR to GIPSA, GIPSA, ASGISA, New Growth Path, National Development Plan, and so forth. So we have a graveyard of policies which have never seen the day of light because of these changes. So South Africa has this ample supply of good policies. It has a well-acclaimed constitution. It has a well-acclaimed governance framework in terms of audit and so forth. But implementation is the problem. If we fail to professionalize and have a capable state, we wouldn't be far from what you have seen in the Arab Spring. Because remember, it was the failure of state to provide. But in order to professionalize, we must have clear standards agreed upon. And we must identify the nature of the problem before it becomes too big of a problem. And that's where the Public Service Commission, at this particular moment when we talk of a capable state, ought to be holding the flag, working, of course, with government, working with the portfolio committee, with Parliament, to which it accounts, such that even civil servants working there have a professional pride of being in government. They look forward to the calling of being in that particular space. But you need security of tenure. You need less interference. Political deployment of cadres is a global phenomenon. You can't say I'll reduce it to zero. But you direct it to very specific areas. You want a chief of staff, you could have that as your political deployment. But you want a DG, that's a professional appointment. You want a chief director in this or DDG in that area, we need competence. Not people who will show up in gala dinners of this or that party because it is in governance, or they show up and ingratiate themselves to this minister and that minister. When ministers change, then all of a sudden you have this turnover. In order to demonstrate that, because many political formations have talked about it, we need to have a barometer to determine and show the results of the damage caused by this. And these published annually so that we can see the connection between this particular decay of public service and the impact it has. What is the cause of corruption? One, once people in a given country start seeing politics and positions in government as the only way up, because there are no other opportunities in business, there are no other opportunities in civil society, you are likely going to have this compression of people trying by all means to get into government for wrong reasons rather than it being a calling. It's because I want to have security for the next 5 years. They are not having the people at heart in that process. So that's where things start. And when that starts, as it has been across the world in different countries, you start having a patronage network, which sometimes people call a patrimonial state. Then the other thing that we should be looking at is the relationship between business and politics. very poisonous arrangement if you do not expose it and understand its patterns, because there is a corrupter and a corruptee relationship. That ought to be regulated. There ought to be disclosures. There ought to be transparency and guidelines into that effect, because now there is too much money into our politics to a point where the business sector may have an overbearing influence in our politics. So to me, the last part is lack of consequences. If you want to fertilize any corruption, let no one see no consequence. Consequence management. Where people have done wrong things, they stay at home for 3 years being paid while someone else is acting. There ought to be a special dispensation to deal with that particular problem, because it's a cancer where people begin to see that it pays to do wrong. Even worse, when a person who has done wrong disappears for a few months, they reappear as ambassadors, they reappear in other deployments. And what I'm saying here, I've raised it even at DERCO, where we designed the diplomatic academy that Parliament and President has approved. Because we said, if you want to professionalize, let's be clear, these ill practices cannot continue where certain sections of the service become the space for fugitives from wrongdoing, and yet somewhere you want to professionalize. Very tough decisions, trade-offs, decisiveness ought to be taken if we are to get rid of the cancer of corruption. And those are some of the things that we ought to be looking at. And most of the developmental states have almost zero tolerance of corruption, especially in public service.
Ngibonga sihlalo, Dr. Somadoda. I am Honorable Sibisi, a member of this subcommittee. I have 2 questions to ask from you. The statement that I will read, and thereafter I will ask a question. Professionalization of the public service can happen as a function of meritocracy, which is a system of appointing or promoting staff based on the knowledge and skills. Therefore, my question would be, as a commissioner of the PSC, how would you advise government departments to institutionalize meritocratic ethos in the administration of the state in order to achieve professional public service? And my last question to you would be, how do you think the PSC can, 1, strengthen its oversight, 2, oversight by Parliament? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sibisi. I do think that we could make merit fashionable and something to look up to in the following manner of making a transition to a merit-based society where excellence, where integrity, where ethics, where hard work and competence is rewarded. The first thing is performance management system. You would have to start by doing the skills profile and the skills audit to see what you have in a given space. Where you see weaknesses, the first chance is to build capacity. The second chance is to channel people to where they are supposed to be. Let's say, for example, a person with theology ended up being a CFO, and God knows how. You then sit down with that person after doing the skills profile to say you could work better in the ethics space rather than struggling with the balance sheet, with the audit committees, which is not your competence. But also, I'm fascinated by other countries. Among those, Vietnam is one of them. Once you are appointed to a board of a state-owned company or into any particular position, you are taken into a deep immersion training program for that particular role. Whether it's a board of Transnet, you ought to know something about transport infrastructure rather than just appearing and you have a 2-hour induction and so forth. The second one is the performance management system. Put up front so that people know the targets. But you know what has happened, a wrong thing that has happened to us, because stealing, corruption has become such a big problem. People think that clean audit, the issue of conformance is the only thing. Some of them do not even spend money. They even forget what was the mandate of the entity. They say, I didn't steal anything, therefore give me bonus. As if stealing was one of the key deliverables. The other one is to have a discussion with the training institutions, as I was saying, to the business schools and universities, to shift. Because I challenge the business schools to say, most of the people who want to be CEOs and DGs, they normally say, I have an MBA. I went to this business school. I said, what is it that you have done that seem not to emphasize ethics, integrity, and how would you infuse that into everything else? And of course, in that profiling of skill, I would also make sure that you identify talent and send them to the best training institutions in the world and give them internships in those so that when they come back, you can see that merit is rewarded. I could go on this, but at the same time, the other issue is that the world is changing whilst we talk. How do you make sure that the skills of the future that people should be competent in are also infused in this? In the training of election management bodies, in the training of people to be deployed as diplomats and in other forums, I've actually emphasized the training to unlearn some of the things which are no longer relevant to the work that we ought to do in order to relearn new skills. Because the other problem that you see that stands on the way of merit is a person who says, I've been here 37 years, not knowing that they might have been the best, their skill might have had merit in the first 7 years. The other 30 years, they have been actually a weight into the system, adding no value nor merit. So those are some of the things to say, if you're a good typewriter and computers came in, your skill is now redundant. New training, new areas of competence become the issue. I think I'll stop it. I'll stop there for now.
put on the mic, Honorable
Okay. Yes, it's on now. I'm not sure whether you did get my last question about oversight.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was, how do you think the PSC can strengthen its own oversight and also strengthen oversight by Parliament? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Sorry for rushing. The first one, I do think that when the committee is doing its own strategy session, and when the PSC is also doing its own strategy session, there ought to be convergence or participation so that there is a transfusion from the two institutions. As I indicated earlier, if we have evidence-based approach to the oversight and what works and what doesn't work, and we partner with the institutions, whether it's universities, research institutes, policy institutes, and so forth, for looking at best practice, that will go a long way in terms of strengthening PSC's own capacity to improve its oversight role. But once it has done that, looking at the trends, the big data analysis, the trend analysis has become the big thing now. Instead of saying, I'll go to each province, I'll go to you have a tool or a barometer to see what are the trends. If it's corruption or poor performance or poor results in your audit outcomes, what are the common things so that your oversight zoom into those rather than deal with case by case. If you have no budget, you can't finish that particular work. So that when you come to Parliament, you say these are the trends, and they are reported regularly. And you say this is what has worked in different countries. And where there are shortages or gaps in our policies, you are able to say, like I was saying in terms of fighting corruption, these are the specific things that we're proposing. That, I think, will go a long way in having that particular oversight role. But regular accounting to Parliament and advising to say A works, B doesn't work. You can even work with SCOPA, work with the Auditor General to see what the trends are and retreat and say, why have our advices and oversight roles not been as effective as they should? So in that way, I do think that we will go a long way, even with a limited budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Figeni. There's a member of this committee, Honorable Clark, who is not in the room, but she is on the virtual platform. She will ask you questions as well. Honorable Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My first question is, it is believed that the responsive, ethical, and values-driven public service depends on, among other things, the investigative function of the PSC on public administration malpractices, particularly in the areas of irregular appointments and the curbing of corruption in government departments. My first question relating to that, how can the PSC strengthen its role of investigation of unethical conducts and play a meaningful role assisting government to curb corruption in public administration? Next question. The power to appoint in South Africa is assigned by Section 3, subsection 7 of the Public Service Act. Ministers or MECs can delegate the power to officials within their departments. What are the major obstacles in the recruitment system in the public sector? Is the public sector recruitment system effective in order to ensure professional and a capable state? And 2, what can be the role of the PSC in eliminating unethical practices in the recruitment system in order to ensure public servants are appointed based on merit? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Clerk, for those questions. In the first instance, I do think that there is a need for capacity building for the PSC to have the investigative effectiveness. And of course, some of these do need resources, as we have seen with the NPA, with the SIUs, with many, entities that deal with criminal justice and many others that deal with investigation. But I do think that, as I indicated earlier, if you were to look for each individual case, which we must, it could take a long time. But if you begin to analyze the pattern and the trend, your advice becomes more pointed on a wider scale rather than case by case where you are told this particular case has taken so long. Let's take, for example, conflict of interest, people doing business, with government when they are in government. You find that this is a common thread, not only in national, provincial government, but also in local government. Even though local government is not within our sphere, having some relationship with entities such as SALGA becomes important. You glean into their own trend analysis, into their own analysis of the patterns of these things. It's easier to preempt, to anticipate such. But not only that, with the change of environment now, COVID-19 has forced us kicking and screaming into e-governance, into the use of virtual platforms. Those too will also come with their own downside, will also come with their own unethical practices. How do we anticipate those and say what will be the crime of the future? And what policies should we put in place? How do we begin to say, instead of trying to design laws of crimes which are fading into the past, in the new technologies, what will be the nature and the face of crime? So that trend analysis and utilization and working closely with research institutions, with universities, with policy institutions that are already looking into those issues can make us have greater impact even with less resources and begin to design intelligent policies as well as investigative effectiveness in all that. The use of artificial intelligence empowered ways of tracking and investigations. I had several discussions with Professor Marwala, who is the AI expert in the UJVC, on the same, and several other people in his committee. And they were showing amazing things that can be done to curb corruption, just in home affairs, just in management of IDs and permissions and so forth, in licensing and so on, in promotions, where it would immediately reveal. So to me, I would say, for high impact on a wider scope with less resources, look for trends. Yes, if there are cases to be followed, investigated, deal with those, but don't be trapped into those alone. The recruitment system. I've already spoken to the issue of cadre deployment gone wrong and gone rogue. And that in itself, I think many political formations from the ruling party to the opposition parties have agreed that there is a weakness in this system and how it has been abused. So that is the first problem of political recruitments instead of recruiting people on the basis of merit. In fact, for me, in the recruitment processes, I would bring professionals. If I say CFO, I bring well-known finance experts from the private and the public sector to come and sit in those panels because they are not beholden to that. You make it transparent, you bring in experts. They can tell when something wrong is going wrong. And they can tell, and then you go through a number of verification processes that even the vetting as to who is shortlisted in the process, and you put the issue of building a meritocratic society as the prominent feature. It doesn't matter where the person comes from if they can demonstrate that they can do the job. That in itself is key. And it has been shown that the studies across the world, countries that are merit-based are growing their economies. They are uplifting their people from poverty. But where you get your recruitment wrong, then you have your public service wrong. That's why PSC then would be coming up with templates, evidence-based, on the best mechanisms of making sure that you only get the best for the positions and you give recognition to talent. And that in itself, I think, is very important in the professionalization of public service.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Dade Fikin. My name is Rosina Komani. I'm the member of this committee. Having listened carefully to your answers, particularly on members of the public service doing business with government, I want to put it to you that there is a very huge loss of public monies due to corruption, especially with the public servants doing business with the state. But then my question would then be, in your own opinion, how could public servants be stopped from doing business with the state, since there is legislation already that is preventing this practice, yet it is still going on? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that question, Honorable Rosina. Nothing takes place of strong, decisive leadership, which is ethical, in government, in the departments, as the first step of making sure that you stop this particular trend. But the Public Service Commission should raise its profile and also raise pressure where there seems to be the slowness of the process, where you even publicize and have regular, report backs to the public and Parliament on the impact of the delay of having a proper legislation to curb this particular problem. But there is nothing stopping Public Service Commission from publicizing statistics and even names of those who are involved in business with government, so that you begin to have a deterrent effect for those people who are doing just that. Because if you are not transparent in the exercise, and if you are not aggressive in addressing these issues with the leadership, they might take longer But each time there's a delay, you come back to Parliament, you partner with Parliament to say, let's move with deliberate speed. In the last 6 months of the delay, this is the cost, this is the rand value of what has been lost to people doing business with government. Because there is another problem here where the problem has been identified. There seems to be lack of political will at times to move with speed. So PSC, as a constitutionally recognized entity working, of course, and accounting to Parliament, ought to take a lot more forceful role in making sure that where there are delays, the damage is exposed.
Dr. Fikeni, is there any question you want to put to this panel?
Well, I would not have a question except to say I appreciate the opportunity. And if I was a successful candidate working with this committee and Parliament, the impact of my contribution, which is made out of a calling rather than just it being a career move, would be seen. As has been the case in the past. When I chaired the IDT, I didn't hesitate to go to the Accountant General and say, investigate everything where there is a wrongdoing, whether it's a board member or executives. And same with the future trends, because the key thing, we might be focusing too much on what has happened. There is a lot of what is going to be happening in a volatile, uncertain, and complex environment. What are the trends of future public administration? That's where my emphasis would be. But I'm just humbled by the opportunity. I don't take it for granted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fikeni. As you are aware, we are interviewing a number of applicants here. You will be informed of the results of this interview in due course. Once again, thank you very much. You are free to leave.
Thank you very much.
Members, let's just have a quick lunch, please. After that, we come back and then do the rest of the applicants. How long should we take? 30 will be fine. Thank you.